Hello, everybody. This is Oswald Cooper. This is my first podcast, but it definitely won't be my last. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Um this has been a result of just lifelong experiences and events and self-education. And the title of this first podcast is COVID-19, A New Beginning, a time for truth and cultural condition. Cultural uh, consolation. And just a little bit of background on this. I'm a product of the 60s. I grew up in New Orleans and housing project. Had my share of experiences with racism there. Uh, in the military. I was in the military for 10 years, in the federal government. And, but while I was in the military, um, I had the privilege of being involved in a project called Managing Cultural Differences in the Classroom. It was a program sponsored by, then they called themselves B'nai B'rith, but at the time, now they're commonly referred to as the Anti-Defamation League. And this thing was pretty enlightening to me. It was the first time that I ever encountered, ever thought about culture. And the scenario was, as a military instructor, we taught sailors from around the world. I was in the Navy, and we taught sailors from different nationalities: Japanese, French, Australian, Pakistani, German, you name it, we had them all in the classroom. And before anyone ever knew what a terrorist was, I guess they had some incidents before then, but it was before 9/11. This was in like the late 80s. And we had almost had an international incident. It wasn't that bad, but we was having some cultural issues with the Pakistani students. And it was basically had to do with their faith and being a lot of the students were enlisted. They had to live in the barracks. Long story short, because of their tradition, they, in the barracks you live in open bay barracks, but not open bay, but you got 4-man room, but they share showers, and that is something that's not that doesn't coincide with their religion. Men can't apparently can't be naked in front of the men. So that presented an issue with hygiene. We were starting to get some issues in the classroom and out of the classroom regarding that the hygiene thing. So that's how I got involved with this thing called Managing Cultural Differences. And we went through this whole exercise. I learned a lot about culture. It stuck with me all my life. But the main thing I got out of the thing in the long run was, after it was all over with and we resolved those issues, it dawned on me that how are we going to expect these young sailors to turn that cultural switch off in the classroom, when they walk in the classroom. It's like, that's just not realistic, and what I learned at that time, most of the isms are all factors of culture. Culture involves We'll go over the definition during this brief. But race is one of the aspects of culture. All right, race and various other things, language, different things. And like I said, we'll go over the definition. But that stuck with me as I continue to go on through my military and federal employee and my career in government, and still experiencing some issues with race and racism. But that, I never forgot that. And so right around the time after Trump got elected, I just started, I was just curious how that happened. And, I know it had to be something greater than race because I knew about culture. So the more I looked into this thing and started digging into history and how this came about, I ended up with this presentation. And actually, this presentation is a variation of a presentation that I did earlier for another organization. And I just modified it after we went to the quarantine, right? And so I'm going to start it and go through it. This is my first podcast, so bear with me. I'm a little nervous and not sure how this is going to work, but like I said, this is my first. This won't be my last. This is my podcast. It's called The Cultural Warrior, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing things on history and culture. Two most important things in our society. Two most important things, period, as far as knowledge-wise, is history and culture. History assigns a group or connects a group of people with a place, with a location. Culture connects a group of people to what they do. And that's very significant to understand and know. And a lot of the things that we're experiencing and going through now is more culture related than it is race related and sex related, all those other isms that are part of culture. So hopefully you get some out of this, but after I get done with this, I'm going to be doing a series of podcasts on history and culture and origins of the American culture, which is really evolved from the European culture that really influences all of us. And so without further ado, I'm going to get started with this. I just wanted to give you a little background. And for most people, just like I said, from my first video, my first podcast, to let people know who I am and give them sort of like a background where all this is coming from now and in the future. So COVID-19, a new beginning, a time for truth and cultural conciliation. So I'd like to start all my presentations with this. I found this online a couple years ago. Gentleman, Reverend Ray Nagin. I think it's Ray. Yeah, I think it's Ray Nagin. Hagen, one of them. Anyway, I thought it was very apropos. I think most people ought to consider this, because one of the biggest problems we have is people, their mind is not open, to new information. And, for the most part, all of us are ignorant to a large degree. There are more things that we don't know than we do. So I think this thing is very appropriate, and I will start all of my podcasts off with this to help people to be conscious and be open-minded. And basically, sure, you can read what it says. The space inside this circle represents my realm, our realm of knowledge. All that I think I know about whatever I think I know is depicted right here within this circle. I must keep in mind that there is more to know than what is within the circumference of my awareness. And I think that's a good thing for all of us to live by. Now, COVID-19 quarantine gave me pause to think. Like I said, based on especially all of the things that I've been researching. But as we went into it, I started thinking, first of all, wow, this ain't too bad. Traffic wasn't too bad. I was walking, I take my walks. And the more I walked and had time to think about this thing, and the more I thought it was time for me to put this thing together. It's been on my mind actually since Donald Trump got elected in 2016, and I finally put this together. So, is the pandemic a curse or a blessing, or is it a crisis or opportunity? Could be either one. Whether you believe in God, a creator, a universe, we all have to admit that this pandemic is a historic event of biblical proportion. We haven't seen anything like this since the great flood of Noah. There hasn't been an event that affected the entire known world like COVID-19 pandemic. And this pandemic is not biased, right? The pandemic doesn't have any political affiliation. It's pretty non-discriminatory. And belief in God or the Bible is as irrelevant as belief in the coronavirus. Let me say that again. Belief in God or the Bible is as irrelevant as belief in the coronavirus. They do exist. And in the beginning, you had some people who, I believe it's a hoax. And a lot of those people got the virus. So, and this is important, important distinction, important thing to point out, because the majority of what culture is based on is your belief systems, right? It don't have anything to do with your intelligence. It don't have anything to do with your IQ. It doesn't have anything to do with all the things that people think make people superior. It's really your belief system. And there's a lot of intelligent people who, believe a whole lot of things like climate change is not real, as a matter of fact. And in the 1800s, 1850s, I think, somewhere around that time, there was a group known as the Know Nothings. Those are the people who supported Andrew Jackson. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of things is based on beliefs. And in European culture, and most cultures in general, but especially in the European culture, then that begins with religious beliefs. That's why one of the first things that the establishers of the Constitution, the first thing they did was that they separated the power of church and state. And kids don't get much education and much information about that history, but that's important because that is really the foundation of our belief system. And so, the virus affects everyone equally and without prejudice. Trying to stay back on topic. That's why I did these slides, because I know I'll go off on a tangent. So I'm trying to keep myself on track. Nothing can compare to what we're experiencing right now, historically or biblically. With all due respect and condolences to those who lost loved ones and the pain and suffering of those who have contracted the virus and survived, the pandemic could be our saving grace. If we take the time to reflect on how we got to this place in time and determine the consequences of staying on our current course, of what the consequences of that will be, we can take advantage of the opportunity this crisis presents us. It will be a blessing to us if we take heed and change our course culturally, economically, and politically, and start working together for the greater good of humanity and the planet. If we ignore the mercy that the universe is bestowing upon us, this crisis will be a curse of which our future generations will not understand or forgive. What we should have learned from this pandemic crisis, these are the blessings. First thing that we should all come to recognize now, that government is not the enemy. Contrary to the propaganda since the 80s, that is not true. We all should be conscious of that now. And more importantly, not just government, good, competent government is important at every level. Starting from, your county, your city, state, every level we see that is important, and it should run efficiently, and it should not be partisan. Government, I'll get to that. Government it should not be run like a business. The first priority, and here's why, the first priority of government is the general welfare, defense, and liberty of the people. People should always be placed before profit, and Main Street should always be placed before Wall Street. These are things that we should learn right now, because these things are obvious. Right now, people are rushing to get back to work, and that's being driven by leadership, administration, and business leaders, corporations, and they are driven by profit. And while we all understand that, we have to eat, but if we're dead, that's not something we don't have to worry about. So we ought to, have our priorities in order. Universal health care is important. All these things that were issues before the pandemic are being brought to light. And that's what I'm saying. You got to realize, whether you are a person of faith, an atheist, you got to appreciate at this time that has been given for us, like I said, unprecedented in history. And what we should be doing with this time, this is the whole point of this podcast, is what we should be doing, the masses, the less than 1%, the stars, the universe has shown, and the weather's been beautiful. That's the thing, the weather's been beautiful. And it is, has shown, look, okay, now look, you have this time, to think about where we at in time now and the things that are transpiring, and, universal health care. Wouldn't you like universal health care right now? Wouldn't that have been great? People would not have to be worrying about having to pay for being on a ventilator and all that kind of stuff. Parents are finding that education and teachers are important and valuable. Every person in job has value and is worthy of a livable wage. And the interesting thing to me is, how all these people, usually on the lower ring of the economic order, now everybody are calling them heroes, or essential. They ain't calling them heroes. They call them nurses and doctors heroes. I noticed that. But they call them essential. They don't call them heroes. But most of those people really have a choice. They got to go to work anyway. You know what I'm saying? Because they need their money. And it's because they don't, earn enough to sustain. Everybody need their money, but the people who need their money most, the ones who got to risk their lives out there so that everybody can have food. So, what's interesting to me, what I want to see is, because the American public have a short-term memory. Those same people, they wouldn't pay $15 an hour, which is barely a living wage. They should make more like 20. And it's possible for this to happen. But that's because we'll talk about that later, why we all always have a tendency to look at, the pennies that are being spent at the bottom and never looked at the millions that are being given away at the top. So we all exist or perish. This is something that we should learn from this. We're talking about, we all connected and we all one. Every time we have a major catastrophe like this, it's been on a smaller scale. We all come together, we all one. And as soon as that, we get past that, oh no, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're black, you're white, you're a racist, you're black lives. It all comes because it takes something like this for us to realize, hey, look, we are all of the same origin. We all the same, right? And everybody realizes that now, and everybody acknowledges now, you know what I'm saying? We have the resources, money to solve homelessness. It was amazing to me how they got all those people from under that bridge. And this is how, see, this is one of the most free times. This is the most equal time that we have all had, because this virus, this is the only thing that will get wealthy people's attention when their lives are threatened. You know what I'm saying? So they found a way to get those homeless people shelter. Now, why couldn't they do this before now? Because they didn't have the will. They wasn't properly motivated. And the problem is that we're always waiting for somebody else to motivate them. They say power concedes nothing without a demand. We don't demand nothing of them. You know what I'm saying? We don't demand anything of them. Even Donald Trump supporters are no different from Barack Obama supporters. They didn't demand anything of him. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's something that we all should be conscious of. That's one of the things that this period, this quarantine has given me to give thought to. Life, family, friends, our relationships with the Creator and the creation is what really matters. That's what's really the most important thing. When it all comes down, when it all boils down, we're complaining about the time that, we don't have time to spend with our family and our kids, and some of us will go through all kind of therapy because we didn't have our time with our parents, or we can't spend time with our kids. Now we got time to spend with our kids and our family. Now you complaining. Now you see what your teachers were going through. You're teaching that little baby, boy, your baby ain't all that you thought he was or she was. You know what I'm saying? But at least you got the opportunity to know this and correct this. And what's going to happen also is with this, people, I know where I work, a lot of people were told they couldn't work from home. Why? Now everybody working from home. These things could be done, people, and these things should be done. I'm going to come up on another slide. Like I said, I always digress because all this stuff is on my mind, but that's why I wrote it down and put it down here. So I'm going to stop sidebar and I'm just going to go through it like this. That's what I'm saying. All right, technology should be embraced, respected, secure, and not feared. It will make our life better. Nature, the creation, and COVID-19, whether it was created by man, which I doubt, or created by nature, it does not discriminate. None of us are safe until all of us are safe from disease, war, and poverty. We owe ourselves leaders with empathy, who are strong and secure enough to allow themselves to be vulnerable, preparing for and acknowledging our weaknesses of strength. We have a common purpose: survival of all the species, whether you black, white, red, brown, green, indifferent. We all have to live on this one planet. The greater good of the whole outweighs the greater good of the few. The right and ability to pursue happiness is a freedom not reserved to the wealthy. That should not be reserved just to the wealthy. Debt and the inability to pursue happiness is slavery. Eliminating, and don't believe these things I've said, go look it up. Eliminate hunger. Eliminating hunger, poverty, homelessness is the most effective way to reduce crime. Crime has been drastically reduced with this COVID pandemic. And the thing about it is that, first of all, crime is, as much as we talk about crime, it's not really a large part of the population committing crime. And the majority of the population they got locked up are not the one who do all the crime. All right, just put it like that. But I'll digress again. Online education, telework, commerce reduces fossil fuel consumption and CO2 emissions. And all these things. Just think about all these things. That people, you don't have to commute no more. That's time. There's more time. You have to do whatever you want to do, work out, stuff like that. And businesses and people are adapting. They're not. I don't think there's not going to be a new normal. We should prepare, but not settle for a new normal. The old normal wasn't that great anyway. This pandemic is an accelerated precursor of what the new normal was about to gradually and is about to gradually become by the end of this decade. Technology will eliminate most manual labor, or so-called essential workers, by the end of the decade. More on this later. Essential workers, labor positions to be eliminated or significantly reduced by technology by the end of the decade include store clerks, shelf stockers. They're going to be replaced by custom scanners and kiosks. There are several of those already out in the market already. AI and robotics. Those are in warehouses and what have you. And even at, store, stocking shelves and stuff. Truckers, Lyft, Uber, and limousine drivers. They already have automated before the pandemic struck, before the quarantine struck. 60 Minutes had a feature on about trucks, automated trucks coming out next year. So in 2021, it may get pushed back a little bit, but ain't too far. And these are the so-called essential workers. You know what I'm saying? And everybody's getting ready to learn STEM and AI. Trust me, they ain't gonna have enough people for this. The whole purpose of technology is to eliminate manual labor. So if you eliminate jobs, but they got more people who need jobs, how all of them gonna do the same job? You know what I'm saying? So I think we ain't thinking this out. But here's the good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's where, as far as the masses are concerned, we ought to be glad and thankful for this, because it's the beginning of the end of capitalism. Commercial and residential construction can be done by 3D printing technology. It has, and they have and can construct buildings more efficiently. With fewer, just look all this stuff up online. With fewer workers and less waste of materials. Fewer builders and less office space will be needed due to remote work, teleworking. Why you need to be in your office. A lot of the stuff that people teleworking doing, in the office they could be doing at home, or are doing. They're going to need fewer requirements for school buildings. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the next slide anyway. But anyway, there are going to be fewer requirements for schools for K through 8. You're going to need schools for, for little kids and daycare. But you're going to need people. That's the industry that's going to be booming because of this technology boom. Because elderly people and children are going to still need caretakers. That's the industry. That's the booming industry. Nurses, EMTs, those type of workers are going to be in high demand in the next 10 years. That's where those jobs should be migrating to. You know what I'm saying? Everything we're doing is archaic. Everything we're doing is based on the 15th century ideologies and economics and agricultural agrarian society. We're still doing this, though we only have, by some estimates, less than 10% of the people feeding the entire world. We could feed the entire world. You know what I'm saying? So this is what's wrong with our society, but we never have time to think of it because they have us on a hamster wheel for the job. And some of us, we're not even thinking. I'll tell you why. Stop. Classrooms will be primary lab for lab assignments and arts. And at the same time, kids will have more time for the arts, for physical education. These things should have never been taken out of school, but they were done intentionally. This is the article. This is what I'm trying to get to, and this is why I just need to just click through because it's gonna get to it and explain it. So just bear with me. Like I said, this is my first podcast, but a lot of this stuff was on my mind. I've been wanting to get off my mind. This is an article. This is a Time magazine cover from April 2nd, 1965. The Computer Society. They knew at that time where society was headed. Excerpts from that article from that Time magazine cover story. This technology, they call it cybernated generation at the time. And the article correctly predicted computers will be able to converse with men. We're talking to Alexa. You're talking to Siri. You know what I'm saying? Run supermarkets and laboratories. Like I said, kiosks and all that stuff is here now. It may not be in your neighborhood, but trust me, they are out there. Help find cures for diseases. What are they using to come up with these cures for COVID-19? All this stuff is in computer databases. That's making the time that they're going to take to come up with a vaccine is going to be a whole lot shorter than it would have been years before the computer. They knew this in 1965. Computers going to translate foreign languages, memorize and store whole libraries. They will be as common in everyday life as the telephone. Need I say more? All right. It's going to be a sort of public utility of information. They predicted this in 1965, 55 years ago. All right. Here's what the article got wrong. They predicted a mass leisure class. They predicted a 20-hour work week. Joseph Fromkin, an IBM economist, made this prediction. They predicted that as little as 2% of the workforce may be employed. Now we think, oh, well, how are we going to eat? Trust me, everything in this society is based on social constructs. And what a social construct means is that it's not a natural way of things, not natural order. It's that some people got together and decided that, hey, this is the way we ought to do this. And what's happened is they convinced the majority of us that the way that we're living and doing things now are the best way. And that's not true. It's not of our benefit, right? It's to their benefit. One of the, Dr. Louis Fine, a computer consultant, said, what the hell are we making these machines for if it's not to free people? Scientists hope the computer would allow man to return to the Hellenic concept of leisure, which the Greeks had the time to cultivate their minds and their bodies and improve their environment while slaves did all the work. The slaves in the modern Hellenism would be the computers. So the question to ask yourself now, well, in the computer age that they talk about now, you know, that's what they were predicting. The computers would be the slaves. Well, then who are the slaves now? Somebody doing that work. That's what I'm saying. And, you know, when you tell people, oh, you're a slave, even professional athletes making millions of dollars, they're slaves. They're working for somebody else. They're doing something that they love. And that's the true meaning of the pursuit of happiness. You know what I'm saying? Most of us not pursuing our happiness. Most of us at a job trying to make the ends meet. So why didn't all that come to pass? Because of a planned, coordinated subversion of government on the state first, on the state level, and the national and federal level by corporations, banks, the ruling elites, including but not limited to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Powell Memo, the Southern Strategy, and the Trilateral Commission. I have little clips coming up. I'm going to explain these things. All right. Who are the slaves? That was my previous question. In the pre-modern Hellenism that they talked about. All right. They're the workers, the laborers, employees, us, the 99%. We are the slaves. Much of the European culture and American culture evolved from Greek and Roman culture. And this is where history is important. Like I said, you gotta understand the history and origin of people. And that's what history will tell you, their origin, what the land they came from, and the culture tells you about what they did. And the Greeks are given credit for democracy, but they also had chattel slavery. All right. And one of the things that I say, and it's been said, I'm not to make this up. You show me your heroes, and I'll show you who that person is. All right. Current leadership, president, he admired Adolf Hitler. That should tell you a lot about that person. The former head of the House of Representatives. His hero is Ayn Rand. Look him up. Look her up. Tells you a lot about people. In the current, there's a lot of words to describe our current democracy we have now, form of democracy. Well, it's not democracy. Our current government we have now is a corporatocracy, plutocracy, oligarchy, kleptocracy. Look it all up, but it's not a democracy. It's not a representative democracy because the people are no longer represented by our elected officials. This is the evolution of American chattel slavery, Hellenism, or the pre-modern Hellenism. All right, slavery. That's why the Southern slaveholding plantation holders didn't want to give up slavery. They were reading these books about Greek culture, and this came from Europe. They idolized and worshiped the Greeks and the Romans, and they wanted to have that life where, look, they had a life of leisure. And when you have slaves, you have a life of leisure. That's what they had. And here's a couple clips to explain those things we talked about. Now, again, do your own research. You know, you have a whole lot of fake news, like they said, and a whole lot of, and this is why you got to be careful what you get on the internet. I try to check whatever I pull up, try to see if I can find 2 or 3 references of it. Because you're always going to have, you know, that's what the elites do now. You know, they put out false information, propaganda, misleading. They have whole nonprofit organizations dedicated to this 24/7. Lee Atwater, Southern Strategy. In 1981, the legendary brutal campaign consultant Lee Atwater was working in the Ronald Reagan White House when he was interviewed about Alexander Lammis. And this audio made public for the first time ever. Atwater lays out how the Republicans can win the votes of racists without sounding.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all want to quote me. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger, that hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, you know. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
Now, this has been a strategy. Started with Nixon in 1968, right? It's the same playbook they used for Ronald Reagan and the same playbook that Donald Trump used, right, to get the Southern Dixiecrats to the Republican Party. Now, we're going to look at the Powell Memo. Listen to the Powell Memo. The Powell Manifesto. In this 1971 memo, lawyer Lewis F. Powell Jr. calls for businesses to play a more activist role in American politics. The Powell Manifesto. The memo was written 2 months before President Nixon nominated Lewis Franklin Powell to the Supreme Court. It was leaked to Jack Anderson, Pulitzer Prize investigative journalist. He cited it as a possible reason for legal objection of Powell's candidacy. You can read this. For 4 decades of corporate pressure. Let me pause this. Let's see. Go back here. Right there. 4 decades of corporate pressure has transformed America. Tax rates on corporations and the wealthy have nosedived. Lawmakers have deregulated corporations in one sector or another. Unions across wide swatches of the private sector have disappeared. The purpose, and this is what's in the memo that this Supreme Court justice wrote. The purpose is to identify the problem and suggest possible avenues of action for further consideration. Oh. It goes on to say the most disquieting voices join in the chorus of criticism come from perfectly respectable elements of society, from the college campus, the pulpit, the media, and the intellectual. Now, this was in the 1960s. You got to remember, this was after the civil rights movement, after Dr. King, all the civil unrest and protests, and all of these special interests. That's an important word to familiarize yourself with, because special interest is the interest of the people, right? When you hear corporate interests, when you hear national interest, they're not talking about you and I interests. They're talking about corporate interests. When they talk about our interests overseas, they're not talking about you and me, Joe Citizen. They're talking about the interests of corporations. What has been the response of business to this massive assault upon fundamental economics, upon its philosophy, upon its rights to continue to manage its own affairs, and indeed upon its integrity? And that's just part of it. You can go to this website to get the whole thing. Just look up Google Power Memo, and you can go over the whole thing. And there are even better excerpts from it when you go there. And here we're going to talk about, this is the Council on Foreign Relations, brief history on that.
The Council on Foreign Relations.
These are the organizations. When you start talking about
today, the CFR maintains that its goal is to increase America's understanding of the world. However, the actual objective of this highly exclusive club is revealed by the rare admissions of the insiders themselves. In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carroll Quigley is allowed to examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network. Quigley reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR. Powerful corporations are also invited to become members. At the close of the 20th century, CFR influence presided over far-reaching consolidations of media control. In 1995, CFR members Michael Eisner of Disney and ABC's Thomas Murphy merged their media empires. Soon after the merger, the Disney-ABC empire becomes a CFR corporate member. In the year 2000, the world's largest internet service provider, America Online, joins forces with Time Warner, one of the world's largest news organizations. The CEOs favoring the move are CNN's Thomas Johnson and Time Warner's Gerald Levin, both CFR members. Once again, another media giant is created under the shadow of CFR influence. Today, an elite handful of individuals define the agendas that are supported by the empire of establishment news.
Now, the Council on Foreign Relations was started in the early 20th century, I think 1921. So they've been around a long time. And I think this article may have been done before the formation of Google and Facebook. But trust me, they are all a part of the Council of Foreign Relations. And the Council on Foreign Relations is intersecting with the Trilateral Commission. And the thing that made me do this too, during this period, because I keep getting all of these messages and Facebook and emails and stuff about hoaxes and stuff. I'm like, man, you know, there's enough history, there's enough data already out there for us to research and find out about what's happening instead of about some new hoaxes. And this is what I'm saying. This is what we should be doing with our time right now to get it, because the only way we're going to fight this stuff, be able to fight this thing and win, is we have to know what we're fighting. You can't fight an unknown enemy. You know, you have to fight. The biggest problem with white men is that they got misdirected anger, because most, I would say 99% of the people in these organizations, at least 95 of you, because you got African leaders, and that's what I'm talking about. This ain't about race. It's about power. It's about money. You have a lot of people in African diaspora, people of color, but that's the leaderships. Trust me, Obama probably has been part of the Trilateral Commission, CFR. These people are currently in government now. They came out in 72, I think, when Carter was elected. I think that was 72, no, 68. When it came out, when he was elected in 68, that's when Carter, I think the Trilateral Commission was started in 73, and in 68, majority of Carter's cabinet was from the Trilateral Commission. And most every president who has been elected has been part of the Trilateral Commission.
The first
this is Noam Chomsky.
Major report of the Trilateral Commission is concerned with this. It's called the Crisis of Democracy. Trilateral Commission is liberal internationalists. Their flavor is indicated by the fact that they pretty much staffed the Carter administration. They were also appalled by the democratizing tendencies of the 60s and thought we have to react to it. They were concerned that there was an excess of democracy developing. Previously passive and obedient parts of the population, what are sometimes called the special interest, that were beginning to organize and try to enter the political arena. And they said that imposes too much pressure on the state. It can't deal with all these pressures. So therefore they have to return to passivity and become depoliticized. They were particularly concerned with what was happening to young people. The young people are getting too free and independent. The way they put it, there's a failure on the part of the schools, the universities, the churches, the institutions responsible for the indoctrination of the young. their phrase, not mine. If you look at their study, there's one interest they never mention: private business. And that makes sense. They're not special interest. They're the national interest, kind of by definition. So they're okay. They're allowed to, have lobbyists buy campaigns, staff the executive, make decisions. That's fine. But it's the rest, the special interests, the general population, who have to be subdued.
And what he means by the state, that puts too much pressure on the state, he basically means that they can't run a war in foreign countries and control people here. And I think, it's been said that this COVID-19 pandemic is a trial run for these organizations that are bound on world dominance. A trial run to see how obedient we are. I can't say it is, can't say it's not, but I wouldn't be surprised. But look how obedient we are. Look how obedient we are. Sheep led by wolves.
The first major report of the Council in Trilateral.
All right. The American government is rooted in 15th century ideology and culture based on religious fiction, an economy based on economic fiction, and a current administration and political party that believes science is fiction. The Doctrine of Discovery is a papal decree that authorized the genocide of indigenous people inhabiting lands found by adventurers like Christopher Columbus in order to claim the land for the Pope or in church. At the time, it was the Pope and the monarchies, kings and queens. And you can't discover lands that you're already inhabited. This whole concept is based on medieval feudalism. And I got this from a book by Native American, Mark, I forget his name, but he has the book, Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery. And it's by, I forget Mark's last name, but he's actually a presidential candidate, believe it or not. Great book. This book really opened my eyes about a lot of things and helped me connect the dots. All right, and this Doctrine of Discovery is a very important thing because, like he says, ongoing, the humanizing legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery. It helps you explain and understand what's going on with gentrification. This is not nothing new. What do you think taking of the lands from Native Americans was? That's gentrification, baby. It was just more harsher, So the Doctrine of Discovery of 1943 is responsible for genocide of indigenous people in North and South America, Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand, and Palestine. Have you ever noticed that all of these countries, the so-called people who claim that this is their homeland are European, and they're a minority, and they claim land from people who are indigenous there, and calling them, saying that they should leave, or they don't want them there. That's like, people talking about immigrants, here in this country. Just think about that stuff. This is this twisted psychology that Mark talks about in his book. This twisted, this fictional, religious belief. Their intent was the acquisition of treasure, land, and resources. It is also responsible for the transatlantic slave trade. In the 19th, 20th, and 21st century, the Doctrine of Discovery was the foundation of other imperialist, supremacist religious fiction, such as The Shining City on the Hill, repopularized by Ronald Reagan, Manifest Destiny, and the Monroe Doctrine. The ruse evolved from spreading Christianity to spreading democracy and liberty. The current free market capitalist economy is the bastardization of the ideology of 18th century Scottish political and moral philosopher and pioneer in political economy, Adam Smith, taken from his classic work, An Inquiry, this is the whole name of the book, but it's shortened to The Wealth of Nations, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. The term invisible hand was only used one time. I'm telling you, to show you how the European culture manipulates and lies and propagandize and what's the word? Co-ops ideas and cultures from other generations, from all other cultures, people, and develop it for their own use. But Smith never intended the term to be used as a wonder magical working formula for prosperity and civic harmony in the free market. This is the economic fiction used by the neoliberal economists to support the agenda of like-minded politicians and global imperialist elites. Both terms, Doctrine of Discovery and Invisible Hand, are based on dysfunctional narratives derived from the diseased social and theological imagination that elevated the sense of worth of the dominant group as superior to the non-Christian inhabitants, which they called savages of newfound so-called discovered lands by European explorers. And this is a quote from Mark Charles, that's his name, Mark Charles, the Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery. That's one of his quotes. And European culture, now this is important for people who self-identify as white, all right? I'm talking about culture. I'm not talking about the people. When I'm saying, I'm talking about the beliefs and value systems, right, of the people, right? Not exactly the people themselves. The people didn't create these cultures. They just kind of adapted and acquiesced to them, right? And it's those beliefs that many people who are not of European origin, and this is the danger that we're in right now, because a lot of people have adapted this culture and value, this value system of what's like what the rapper said, get rich or die trying, something like that, 50 Cent. You know what I'm saying? That's how many of us think. It's all about the dollar. It's all about wealth. And that's unsustainable. That's a value system that's been placed on us. It's not of people of African diaspora, of people from indigenous origins. They believed in the connected being one with nature, not dominating and controlling nature. And that's a purely European thing from European culture. It's directly European culture, not the people, is the deadliest pathological pandemic in history. It's directly or indirectly responsible for the incalculable genocide, death, and misery around the globe for the last 500 years. People adjust to or assume the culture of their leaders, rulers, and parents. And that's what I got from, I learned that when I was doing the managing cultural differences. You know, cultures, you have individual cultures, cultures that are based on individualism, and cultures that are based on collectivism. And European culture has this whole idea on individualism, which is a false dichotomy, false belief, because the rich, as you can see with all of these organizations, they do. They're not doing this by themselves. They organize, right? But they tell you, oh, you don't need to organize. That's the propaganda. That's the psychology, the psychological warfare that they perpetrate on us on a daily basis. And they do it with television and newspapers and all that stuff. Capitalism versus feudalism pyramid. About to show you what this thing is. Welcome to neo-feudalism. The phenomenon of corporations take control of cultures, individuals, governments, leaving the poor dependent on private interests, a situation resembling the traditional feudal society. The 1% become the lords, and the 99% become serfs. And this diagram pretty much says for itself. If you look at it, it shows it. This is how it was in Europe. On the left-hand side, there was monarchy. They had king, queens, emperors. And you had the land gentry, that's the dukes. They had clergy. I think personally, clergy was probably right up there with the monarchs, because they had to go to them to get permission to do things like get married and, you know, stuff like that. They were the one who started the Doctrine of Discovery, who authorized, you know, that, you know, they can discover lands where people were already there. And I think that line should probably go right up here. But that's the land gentry, that's the dukes, the earls, the lords, landlords. That's where that term comes from. Then you got the royal ministers, you know, that's the people, you know, in the parliament that they have. And then you had the merchants, or the mercantile class. They were the ones who got rid of the monarchy, right? And you slide that over to here, that's these people, you know, that's probably more up here. With the corporate elites, you know, the business class. They were the ones who started going out in the free world to get to make their mark, so to speak. Then you have vassals, and that would be like the tenant farmers, like big agri, you know, that would be here. Military officers, and right at the bottom is everybody else. That was peasant, laborers, and conscripts. And who that is, that's workers, students, soldiers. Then you have our top professionals, entertainers. They're a little bit above us. And these are the people who help keep this system going, right? Because it benefits them, right? And this is black and white. See, it's not about a race thing. You know what I'm saying? You have top bureaucrats, elected officials. If the president has to get money from these people to get elected, who is really in charge? That's why they are ranked above the president. The president has to be reelected every 4 years. You're in a corporation for life. You know what I'm saying? Or however long, you know, you are before you get fired. But those values and belief systems from those leaders live on well past the life of their leaders. This is a classic case, like J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was right there at the turn of the 20th century. You know, he was one of the robber barons, responsible for the death of some strikers. You know what I'm saying? And these are the people who really run things. The Federal Reserves, the bank, which is not a government entity, right? So you got to think of the people. At one time, the Federal Reserve, you know, they had more money than God, and they still do. But now you got corporations with as much money or more than bankers. Look at Amazon. Look at Google. They have more money than the country for all purposes. You know what I'm saying? They're not running deficits. The country running deficits. You know what I'm saying? They're making profits, and they're not paying taxes. So we're gonna shift gears to what is culture. Now I know a lot of people saying, well, what that have to do with COVID-19? Has everything to do with COVID-19, because COVID-19 has given us an opportunity, to think about these things and given us time. We still have time. We don't have a lot of time, but it's time for us to wake up, because we got to make a big decision coming up here in November. And we got to start making these decisions based on all facts and knowledge and history, not conspiracy theories. History has, the data is there. That's consistent for over years. These conspiracy theories, they're new. You have to figure out what happened. They still ain't figured out what happened with Kennedy, and that's some 50 years, 60 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So, but this stuff that we talking about here, culture, the Doctrine of Discovery, all that stuff is documented history. But we don't know that. And it's not by coincidence that we don't know that. So let me go on. I know I'm done. This has been way longer than I thought I wanted it to be. But like I said, it's my first time and I need to get it out to you, so I'm going to get it out. So what is culture? The culture code. What is culture? Culture is a system of beliefs, values, customs, traditions, art, language in a group or a society. It's a way of life. That's basically what culture is, our lifestyle. There are macro, regional, macro cultures, which that's the national culture. People talk about Americans have their culture, French have their culture, regional and national cultures. Then you got, the micro cultures, okay, so each state, has its different culture. The culture of New York is different from the culture of Louisiana, is different from the culture of California. And then, it goes down. These are all microcultures. Where it comes down, the culture really begins in the home with your family. Culture usually adapt the values and beliefs of their leaders, parents, children from their children, congregations from the minister, employees from their CEOs, the military from the commander-in-chief, that's soldiers from commanders-in-chief, and the nation, the people, get their lead from, they either adjust to it, or they embrace it, right? And a lot of people embrace the current administration's beliefs and value system, but a lot of people don't. Daniel Coyle's identified 3 traits found in successful cultures. And he's really talking about leadership, right? This is a fascinating book. It's another book that we should have to pick up. And these are audio books, people. And one of the reasons why I'm saying, you say you don't have nothing to do, well, at least for another week, probably longer, we're not going to be back up 100% for a while. And even when they do, I don't think they're going to go back to where it was. I think a lot of us still going to be teleworking. Get these books, the Culture Code, the Unsettling Truths, and there's several other I'll list later. Get these books. Go on, quit wasting your time with these distractions, like these games with, these game shows and prize shows and stuff like that, man. That's really a waste of time. Those people who hosting shows didn't get rich by watching those shows. They got rich by honing their skills and their crafts, right? And that's important. That's what I'm saying. They had to put in the work. And most of us right now, and it's by design, don't put in the work, don't know how to critically think. And that's why I'm doing that, to start that, And I know it's a big elephant to eat, but I'm going to do a little bit at a time. And I'm going to give me some more people, some more ants to take a bite of that elephant with me. But Daniel Coyle's identified 3 traits found in successful cultures and from the leadership. People must feel safe. Leadership must embrace their weaknesses. The group must share a common purpose. Coyle applies this to microcultures, not macrocultures such as regional and national, like Europe and America. Do African Americans or any group of non-European origin feel safe physically, psychologically, and emotionally in America? It's a rhetorical question. Think about that as it applies to you. how many leads, supervisors, officers, CEOs have you worked with or for who were secure enough to admit they don't know something or wrong or seek honest opinions, whether they agree with it or not? And this is going to explain why we believe what we believe and why the ruling class is able to control and dominate and manipulate us. All right. The problem of the 21st century is cultural hegemony. W.B. Du Bois said at the beginning of the turn of the 20th century, the problem of the 20th century is the color line. Well, I have a great deal of respect for Dr. W.B. Du Bois, but times have changed. You know what I'm saying? And the color line is just a symptom of the cultural line, the cultural hegemony. What is cultural hegemony? Cultural hegemony is philosophy and sociological concept that a culturally diverse society can be ruled or dominated by one of its social classes. It's the dominance of one social group over another, i.e., the ruling class over all other classes, the wealthy 1% over 99%. The theory claims that the ideas of the ruling class come to be seen as the norm. They are seen as the universal ideologies perceived to benefit everyone, whilst only really benefiting the ruling class. And another definition is the term hegemony was coined by Gramsci to denote the predominance of one social class over others, the bourgeoisie hegemony. This refers to the political and economic control, but also the hegemonic culture. The bourgeoisie propagated their own values and norms so that they can become the common sense values of everyone in the state, particularly those subordinate by it. People in the working class and other classes identified their own good with the good of the bourgeoisie and helped to maintain the status quo rather than revolting. That's what I'm talking about applying it right now. You know what I'm saying? This country is way ready and primed for a revolt, but it can't be a violent revolt because one of the other aspects of the European culture is violence. Violence is something that the European culture is very well adept in. There's a clear relationship between persuasion, consent, and occasional brute force involved in cultural hegemony. And here's another little video of it. Now the pyramid scheme.
Power resides at the top of the pyramid, with each lower tier controlling the next. At the top, the ruling elite, the owners of capital, the rich and powerful, the group who owns most of the world's wealth and is in control of the global money supply. Money is the supreme leader here. Anyone who controls this controls everything. Bankers and banking institutions are the regulators of money. They have the power to create it and to retract it. Big businesses and corporations are the monopoly powers over everything we use and consume. They produce the products and services within society. The state or government is the authoritative institution that is responsible for maintaining the social structure. These are the three tiers at the top of the social pyramid: banking and money, big business and capital, and the state or government. The groups residing at the top of these tiers are the ruling elite, like Gramsci described. It is their worldview which is directed and spread throughout society. This is done to mold people into their culture, which in turn keeps their power safe. Protect the power regime and social structure, the security and armed forces, or military and police, are in place to reinforce and maintain the social norms and rule of law. The most influential part of this hegemonic structure are the social institutions that educate, occupy, and entertain the people. The social institutions in society undertake the role of socializing people into the values, beliefs, and norms of the ruling elite. Religious, educational, legal, working, and media institutions are to name but a few. People continuously pass through these socializing environments throughout their whole lives. These institutions tell society what to think, believe, and want. They are responsible for shaping people into abiding citizens, which will then eventually take on the same cultural beliefs of the group in power. As capital and money are the supreme rulers of this social structure, and all organizations and people need money to survive, these socializing institutions are inevitably controlled by the ruling power of the elite. At the bottom of the pyramid and of society are the people. The goal of cultural hegemony is to maintain the power and control of the ruling group. The dominant group uses hierarchical social structure to manufacture and direct society into their preferred shape and direction. When culture becomes hegemonic, it becomes common sense for the majority of the population.
Social mechanism of indoctrination and control of the masses by cultural hegemony that you saw in that previous clip, or religion. I've received several clips that I feel so badly for. I just watched the little kids. There was one little kid quoting the Lord's Prayer. I don't think the kid was the baby. I'm talking about the infant was no more than 2 years old. A very bright, cute kid. But does the kid? This is how that indoctrination begins. You know what I'm saying? It's like, before a child even knows what's even going on in the world, you're getting baptized, or you're getting christened. You know what I'm saying? And this is how you are indoctrinated into this. And it starts with religion, and then it starts with school. You get in kindergarten, your parents are the light of your life, when you're a kid. But when that you kick and scream before you get in school, and you get socializing with your friends, then you don't want your mom to even come with you. That's socialization. You know what I'm saying? That's how we learn that. And the education system now, especially way worse than before, at least they were giving us a relatively good education. And now that is totally controlled and dominated by private industry. And that ought to tell you something. The media is controlled mechanism of thoughts, values, and beliefs of the masses. I had a girlfriend who was a communication major in San Diego. And she came home one day and very upset, told me, man, my professor pissed me off. She told us that he can control what he thinks. She's a telecommunication major. And before I met her, I was in electronics technology at Delgado community college. And they had, I was in radio and television repair, and they showed us how at the first advent of television, they showed how they could manipulate. And this is the beginning of 1948. They would use this at movies to insert, because movies, if you don't know, movies are just a bunch of still pictures that are shown at a high rate, right? Now, faster than your eye can see it, right? That's all moving pictures are. That's why they call them movie pictures in the beginning. And they used to have this, it could give you subliminal suggestions by putting popcorn. I think the flicker rate in the beginning was like 160, 60 cycles per second. So, you know, it was nothing to put maybe every 30 cycles, you know, a pitch of popcorn. And studies prove that you can influence people to go do stuff that way. Now, imagine the technology that they got out now. And you got television with, you know, resolution rates of what, 4,000, 4K. That's what they're talking about, you know, flicker rate and all that stuff. And and so that's, just imagine, that's how influential that is. I mean, now they have more of it, but who's to know what they're doing with the technology as far as giving you subliminal messages. Entertainment. Media controls mechanism of thoughts. Control mechanism of thoughts, value, beliefs of the masses. Social constructs, propaganda. It's not just Fox News, folks. It's all the news, like they showed you. The Trilateral Commission have people from every channel, every station. They caused, you know, they oversaw the merger of Disney and CNN or whatever that was. You know what I'm saying? They are, all of that is the same. You know, that's why you get the same, pretty much the same news on every channel. You know, they might have a different spin on it, you know, but it's still the same thing. So, you know, you might have one, I mean, you might have a news organization that's more in line with your views, like, you know, MSNBC, but, you know, after a while, after watching it, it's like, okay, yeah, they got their own spin on it too, you know, and it's not what they say. They're going to tell you a lot of things that they agree with. The problem is the things that they don't tell you, things that they leave out. That's the thing. That's how they control and manipulate us. Entertainment indoctrination begins around adolescence. It becomes a psychological and intellectual control mechanism in adulthood. You know, you got people in their 40s and 50s, you know, wearing their pants sagging down and, you know, showing all their breasts and get tattoos and all kind of stuff. And these are not kids no more, but they was indoctrinated with this in their teenage years. And, you know, they call it now the advanced adolescence, you know, where these people are still thinking like teenagers in their 30s and 40s and 50s, even some of them, you know. In the 40s and 50s, they're still dropping it, trying to drop it like it's hot, you know what I'm saying? More social mechanisms of indoctrination can include control of the masses, legal system. Now, the legal system, that's when they start strong on. All the rest of those are real soft tactics, all right? Get you early, but, you know, now the legal system, don't get me wrong, it's for, you know, there are people who do bad things and they need to go in the legal system, but there are people who are coerced and controlled by the legal system too, to do things, and especially if you go against the status quo, that legal system can be used against you. Like they say, your words can and will be used against you. That legal system will and can be used against you. Like they talk about dissidents in places like China and stuff. We have them here too. You just don't hear about them. You know what I'm saying? Then they have police who they maintain the local and physical control. Now that's when they can't get you with the soft power. Now they start putting hands on you and start using weapons and stuff like that. you know, and that's what the police are for. Police is local physical control mechanism for protection and preservation of property, institutions, wealth, and persons of the ruling class. It's to protect their wealth. It's not worrying about protecting the wealth, especially not black men, black people who are getting shot by police. It ain't nowhere in hell they're protecting their persons. You know, they don't have no wealth to protect, you know. And, you know, they're down there protecting those stores, you know, which, look, everybody works hard for what they do. I'm not saying that's not a problem. What I'm saying is that you're supposed to protect and serve all the people. Military. Military is the big stick used for national and international control mechanism to project and enforce hegemonic agenda of the ruling class. But in time of crisis, as you saw back in the 1960s, and that was their major concern. That's why they put out this, they started to try lateral commission, because they couldn't, one of the reasons why the Vietnam War ended was because popular opinion went against the war. And they had so much social unrest that they couldn't continue to fight the war in Vietnam and have military people over here, you know, trying to control the masses. They don't have to worry about that anymore. The most thing we're gonna do is click on a petition online. People, that ain't gonna get it. That ain't gonna get it. Then there's not gonna be another Dr. King, another Malcolm. I mean, they may be out there, but the system don't work that way anymore. Now, we still gonna have to organize and get out there, but it's gonna have to be a mass organization. It has to come from the bottom up and without any central leadership. You know, that's how it's gonna have to be done. And that's the purpose of this. So, you know, get this out to people who are interested. Some people don't care no more about this than the man in the moon. And look, that's gonna be the majority. What you're gonna find is that the majority of the black folks did not participate in the civil rights movement. Anybody who believes that is fallacy. But that, if you knew the history, you would know that. So, you know, I'm not gonna be disappointed. Matter of fact, people who don't believe this could be done, I don't want to have nothing to do with them. But that's not the people who I need. I need people to believe. You know, people who want to get things done and willing to put in the work, because that's what it takes. And then you had a Federal Reserve. That's really, you want to talk about a hidden hand, that's the hidden hand, but it ain't hitting so well. I mean, it's right up there. He who controls the gold makes the rules, you know, the golden rule. So that's the soft power they use to fund and control and manipulate the political economy of nations. That Haiti is still being controlled by the debt that they were forced to pay for freeing it for overthrow. Crazy, man. I mean, you talk about conspiracies, fact is strength in the fiction. You know, Haiti ain't never been able to recover. The only truly free democracy in the Western Hemisphere. The America was supposedly first, but they had slaves. The slaves had a democracy where everybody was free, irregardless of race, color. And that was in their constitution. And one thing, you know, people always talk about NAACP, but whatever organization, whatever type of power, whenever, and this is what I try to tell white people who self-identify being white. You don't have to be afraid of us, because we know what it feels like to be oppressed. You know what I'm saying? And it's not in our, even though we know, now there may be some people like that because they learned it from the European culture. But the culture that we come from is collective, you know, and they believe in working for the collective good of the whole. You know, most collective cultures had no concept of one man owning the land and everybody worked for that one man. We all worked as for family together and shared in the wealth. You know what I'm saying? So Haiti, when they overthrew the French, the Spanish, whoever it was, when they overthrew the Europeans in the slave revolts, when they created the government, they didn't exclude white people or people who self-identified as white. That freedom was given to everybody. You know what I'm saying? So you don't have that to fear from us. But somebody said, I don't remember who it was, I may have been Chet Anti-Diop, but it was someone who said that one of the greatest fears, well, I know one of the founding fathers, I think Hamilton may have even said it, that they know they're gonna have to reckon this day with God, because they know what they did and created was wrong. They knew it was wrong. And the biggest fear that most people who are self-identified as being white, because I've learned in my life that most people think that other people think like they do. And, that's a cultural thing. You know what I'm saying? In every culture, people think that everybody think like you do. And white people think that, because they are vengeful. That's a vengeful, violent culture. And if anybody had done what they have done to other people, indigenous people of the world, they would think, they would think that they would do that. They would do them harm if it was them. You know what I'm saying? And that's not how other culture, people who come from collective cultures, think and believe. So you don't have that to fear from us. What you need to fear is the ruling class, who don't have any problems, and they have killed white people, and a lot of those in the 20th century and Industrial Revolution, when they had union campaigns and strike, those people getting killed on those strikes were mostly Europeans, immigrants, and who hadn't yet got the status of being white yet, and some whites, but some native-born American whites, but that's who they were killing, So one of the things that we have to do is realize that this is a cultural, psychological, and spiritual warfare. All military and government employees take an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I was in the military, I took that oath. I was in the government, I took that oath. And I believe in that oath. And, patriotism is not waving the flag. It's those things that we do when nobody else is looking. And when, it's knowing and understand that the flag in the pledge, it says that we pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. The flag stands for the republic. The republic don't stand for the flag. You know what I'm saying? That's what the flag is, just a symbol, right? All these people who died, the bugle, the flag carriers wouldn't let the flag. That's crazy. It's just piece of cloth. That's part of that, that dysfunctional fictional imagination. You know what I'm saying? But I believe it. I believe in the Constitution, in the words of the Constitution, not the writers, because they spoke with a folk tongue. But the words, they got to live up by them, because word is spirit. That's written. Words, my words are spirit in their life. That's a quote out of scripture. We are being destroyed from within. All these people talking about the immigrants are not getting over here by themselves, people. You know what I'm saying? It's just like the drugs. If there wasn't people using it, there would be no, like supply and demand. There would be no need for it. If there wasn't people hiring the immigrants to come, the Southern immigrants and immigrants, from, south of the border, if there wasn't any farmers hiring them, they would have no reason to come here. So you got that displaced anger again, but it's always easier, and it's pretty cowardly, for white men. They'll always go after the weakest target. they don't have the balls to stand up against those who really are oppressing them, right? Because they know that they will kill their ass. They know that because they know they violent. You know what I'm saying? So again, getting our course. So the 1% and all who support the austerity measures, policies, are Confederates. You know, they're no different than the 19th century Southern counterparts who were determined to destroy the Union and maintain slavery. Only this time, we are conscious and aware that they're trying to keep us in intellectual and psychological slavery. They are the equivalent of the American Taliban, trying to maintain their wealth, power, and privilege. And they're worse than the Taliban, because at least the Taliban wasn't, you know, they were stopping the drugs from coming into the country. You know, they just had their own religious trip on things. And that's why religion is a problem. Spiritual warfare is not the same as a religious holy war. I'm talking spiritual in the context of the intangible, positive, affirmative character, personality, intent, moral fiber, and ethos of a people, of a person. We're talking about the us in the USA. And by us, I mean all of us, of all hues, nationalities, and colors. They're good in people. You know, evil prevails when good people do nothing. We ain't doing too much these days. Consumer capitalism is an unsustainable assault on the people and the planet for the benefit and profit of a few. It should be replaced by a form of conservationist resource management economic system based on equality, sustainability, survivability of the whole planet and all species. Here's a long-term strategy, about to wrap this up. Long-term strategic plan for cultural revolution of values and the mind. A cultural revolution of values in the mind. Education. First thing, we got to educate ourselves. And that's why the purpose of this whole podcast. Education. Knowledge is power, people. Knowledge is and wisdom. It's be the strength of our salvation, stability of our times. You know, and you pay for what you don't know. You know, so we got to educate ourselves. We must no longer depend on social institutions to promote and develop critical thinking skills, not education. I use that word intentionally because we don't have an education system, we have a training system. We have a system where we train people to think the way we want them to think, to do the jobs that we want them to do, and nothing about developing themselves. And that's what we no longer have. And that's why the COVID-19 thing is a good thing, because these private schools, these you know, people, what do they call these schools now? What's that? Which call them schools? No longer public schools anymore. And the public schools weren't that great, but they're even less. The new system of schools, man, I can't think of what the name of that is. Well, anyway, where the schools have been privatized. See, privatization is the greatest form of tyranny, and corporation is not democratic. You know, business is not democratic. You don't have nothing to say unless you own the business. You don't get a vote on what they tell you to do. And so when they take and make these schools, they privatize these schools. That's what basically they're doing. They're getting the public view, getting out of the public view, and they're forming these dictatorial indices where they can just determine. And this is all funded by those organizations and their nonprofits by the wealthy, you know, to teach, to to pay somebody to teach kids to be subservient and to not to think independently. And that's what we have to encourage and promote. And I think this COVID-19 is the first step toward us getting that way, to see the look. First of all, the education that we had was based on agriculture, with children off 3 months. That's no longer necessary. We got all the information and technology available in their hand, palm of their hand every day. Why did we have to be cooped up in the classroom, right? Because it's designed that way. They want them to be that way. This is an inefficient means of educating our kids. Our kids really no longer have to be in school for 12 years, because it depends on their pace. You know what I'm saying? They can learn that information. If they add those 3 more months every year, that's at least 11, and depending on the pace of the student. And nothing is more powerful than peer pressure, to have people, to group people by age. That's archaic too. Everybody don't learn and move at the same pace, but kids will be encouraged and promoted by other kids, by their peers. You know what I'm saying? That's straight. They try to use that peer thing with promoting people in the grades, but that don't work because you promote them anyway. You know what I'm saying? Whether they got the material or not. And when people have that peer pressure, that's more effective than anything you can do administratively, anything like that. So participation. All right, we have education, organization. We must create independent networks of unified labor cells. Right. Again, no centralized unions. You got to have individualized groups that coordinate and communicate with each other. But you have those centralized unit cells, centralized labor unions and stuff. That's how they were able to take them out. You know what I'm saying? So it'll have to be some type of organization that's, not centralized. You know what I'm saying? Where they can just take out one and take out the whole union. Participation. We the people must become actively engaged in and participate in our own self-governance. Reciprocation. We must, as often as possible, support each other's causes. Registration. We must encourage nonpartisan registration of everyone. Ensure constituents, mobilization. Ensure constituents get to the polls and vote. Now people say, well, voting don't matter. You're right. If you don't think it don't matter, it don't. And if you think it do, it does. But, that's where it's going to have to start. But short of picking up arms and charging the state houses, federal houses, and that's a story for disaster. That's a plan for disaster. Because this culture that we live in, man, they're definitely ready and able and prepared and better armed for violence. That's not the way. So why, the reason why, one of the main reasons why the political system doesn't work, we like to point our fingers at the politicians, but the biggest part of the system are the people. When you have a system where less than 50% of the people participate, that they win. Simple as that. And, it's like, you got to learn that, losing or failing is not losing. Just because you failed don't mean you lost. That means you had an opportunity to learn from that experience. And so often with a lot of young people, is that not young people, old people too, because young people come old. They believe that when they're young, they believe it when they get old. But a lot of young people, get frustrated. The race belongs to he who endures, not to the swift. You're not going to always be the fastest, but the ones who's able to endure the longest, that's the one who wins. The one who gets knocked down and gets back up, continues to fight. That's how it goes. Sound like I've been there? Yeah, I experienced that my whole life. All my life, so I had to fight. Right? Evaluation. Analyze the results of our efforts. Oh, mobilization. Where did I stop? I stopped at registration. Must encourage nonpartisan registration of everyone. Ensure constituents to get to pose votes. That's mobilization. Revolution. That's the big thing. Peaceful, nonviolent revolution of values and thoughts. We're gonna cover that in a minute. All right. But we're not talking about a violent revolution. We're talking about revolution of the mind. Evaluation, analyze the results of our efforts. Remediation, adjust, adapt, and modify as needed. Then repeat the process, replicate, start all over until we achieve our goals. That's why it is important. That's why this part is important, because whether you win or lose, you need to evaluate what you did right, what you did wrong. This goes back to that thing of the culture code, where it talks about vulnerability. You must acknowledging vulnerability is a strength, because you don't get complacent. So whether we win or lose, even if we have the revolution next week, that don't mean it's gonna stay that way forever. The only way that as a matter of fact, it's harder when you get on top than it is when you're trying to get to the top. It's harder to stay on top. Ask any professional athlete, Muhammad Ali, anybody can tell you that. It's harder to stay on top than it is to get on top. It's hard to get up there, but it's even harder to stay there. And that's why whether we win, lose, or draw, we got to go back to the drawing board. And find out, how we keep the title once we get it. First, we got to figure out how to get it. Then we got to figure out how to keep it. Remediation. So we say we evaluate, go what we did wrong, we did right, adjust and adapt, then repeat the process, start all over again. This is what we're talking about, revolution of values.
I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our present policies. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth with righteous indignation. It will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries, and say this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of Latin America and say this is not just. The Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, filling our nation's homes and with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. It is a sad fact that because of comfort, complacency, a morbid fear of communism, our proneness to adjust to injustice, the Western nations that initiated so much of the revolutionary spirit of the modern world have now become the arch anti-revolutionaries. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism. A genuine revolution of values means in the final analysis that our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. Every nation must now develop an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole in order to preserve the best in their individual societies. This calls for a worldwide fellowship that lifts the neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation, is in reality a call for an all-embracing, unconditional love for all men. This often misunderstood and misinterpreted concept, so readily dismissed by the niches of the world as a weak and cowardly force, has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of mankind.
You're not going to hear that speech on Martin Luther King Day. That's the post March on Washington Martin. That's the revolutionary Martin. That's the Martin who was coming to the same place that Malcolm X, he and Malcolm were coming to the same place. That they realized that, hey, they're fighting the same enemy.
I'm convinced that if we...
So we'll wrap this up now. I mean, there's a timeline for this. I left this date. This is when this had been something that I had been working on since Trump got elected. And I presented it one time at a festival, Citizens American Citizens. I forget what it was, a group, but it's a nonprofit group that Citizens University they had, and I did this presentation there. But this is realistic, and I put this out like this because people got to realize, look, this has been going on for 500 years, and it really has gotten the last 40 to 50 years is really where it has taken a turn for the worse. When they started doing those organizations like the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, all those organizations we talked about earlier, the Powell Memo, the Southern Strategy, all that stuff is just really it was late in the 50s, the 70s, after civil unrest. And that's all this that they took. See, one of the things about evil is that it never rests. You know, one thing that about the like I say, the wicked never rest, never sleep. And the thing about good people, we get complacent. You know, we think, oh, why everyone get all excited? It's like with Barack, you know, like, oh yeah, we haven't. Just like the civil rights movement, no, we haven't. That's only the beginning. And so I intentionally put this timeline out here like this because it's over 500 years, 400 years for African Americans in America, but when you look at all of the Americans in the Caribbean where slavery started for about 500 years beginning. That's with the beginning of the Doctrine of Discovery. So it's the timeline I looked at. Now, I started, if we do this in a 4-year cycle, you know, and that's why I started 2017 after Trump got elected. And this is the stages. And I just put it, that's the stages, first year, whatever. And it's going to take a 400-year cycle. Now, that depends. And, it's just like it's just like the quarantine. How long it takes depends on us. It depends on how fast we organize, educate ourselves, and wake up and recognize what's going on. Could take 20 years, could take 40 years, could take 100 years. Really all depends on us. What we can do individually. First, you got to recognize your inner wall. The Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War, talks about that. It talks about the best tactic in war is to be at war with the enemy not even knowing that they're under attack and being attacked. That's basically what is happening to the working class and middle class. You have been under attack for the last 50 years. And a large part of it, you were complicit in doing it to yourself. And some of us still are, like those who support Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? And not to say that those who support the Democratic Party are any better. It's just that it's blatantly obvious that Trump's policies are not in their best interest. At least the Democrats still try to give us a perception of respect us enough to let us think, okay, well, what they try to do, they want to go gradual and slow. You know what I'm saying? And that's just another form of maintaining the status quo too. But they're not as blatant as the Republican Party is. So we got to recognize that, hey, Democrat, Republican, black, white, immigrant, native, we are not the enemy. The enemy are those people, the ruling class, the 1%, less than 1%, who are making these decisions, who can afford to have lobbyists, work on their behalf in a representative government. Decisions like was that decision where Citizens United, where money is power, money is that's just blatantly obvious that is wrong. That. So if you got more money, then your vote is worth more than my vote. That is blatantly wrong. You know what I'm saying? But they only control the politicians. They only control the Supreme Court. This thing ain't gonna get no easier, folks. But you gotta recognize and wake up that you in the walk and stop fighting among ourselves. And pick a side. That's why not voting is a vote for whoever the enemy is. Not voting is a vote for the prevailing side. Now, we're not totally handicapped. We just need to start focusing our money and our funds and resources to those things and organizations that are directly helping us, right, in a tangible way. I get so sick and tired of all these organizations, and I'm gonna call them out, NAACP, the Urban League, the Black Caucus, who haven't improved the lives of the masses of Black people since they've been in operation. Yeah, we got the Civil Rights Act from it, but man, since then, nothing, and You know, everybody hitting us for money. I'm tired of it. You know what I'm saying? Especially the churches. I ain't been giving my money to no church. But, you know, the churches, you know, that money that we giving in the church, that's money that we need to be putting together. If the church not involved with the revolution, we don't need to be giving them our money. If they're not about the betterment of the overall good of the people, which is supposed to be what they're doing anyway, to taking care of the poor, you know, the downtrodden, you know, that's what, you know, the Savior would have done. So we got money. We just got to focus and direct our resources to the things that are in our benefit. People, we got to recognize that people are more valuable and powerful than money. That's why we should put people before power, before policy, you know, before all that stuff. People before profits, you know. Collectively, we have financial resources. But we got to invest those resources in ourselves. We need to join or create a civic or recreational organization. We need to find alternative news sources other than mainstream TV, cable, like Sirius Radio, black only, black on purpose TV, local black radio stations, and you know, those stations that not only black stations, those stations that support the cause of the common man. Just like, again, like I said, it's not about race. Confirm any info from social media with 3 resources. I said that because I've been getting all the stuff on Facebook, you know, all the stuff, you know, about these conspiracy theories. And, you know, some of them, you know, have some validity, but the majority of them is like, man, there are these sites that you can go to. I forget the name of them. And it's late, I'm kind of tired, so that's why I'm burning out. But there are these websites that you can go to that will fact check, you know, anything that you put out there. And some of the stuff that put out there are just bait. You just hit put, oh, nope, that's wrong. We check that, that's wrong. And I can't think of the name of the sites right now, but if you just look at them, go online. I think one of them is called, I can't come to me right now, it'll come to me later, but just confirm your sources. Quit spreading propaganda. That's what I'm talking about. You know, we need to quit doing that. That's why people do it, and they target us because they know we're not gonna check the sources. Become autodidactic. What that means, self-educate. You know, most of the stuff that I'm telling you guys, I want to know. A lot of us don't care to know. But for those of you who want to know, I'm putting it out there for you. And those who want to do something, you know, be a cultural warrior with me. And we get together, you know, and organize. And, you know, it's amazing what just a small band of people can do, you know. That's how change comes about most of the times anyway. Small groups of people. Especially if you're passionate about it and it's a potential career option. Become the subject matter expert. And this is the last sermon by Dr. King. And we're talking about the arc of the moral universe, talking about, and this is one thing that this is why I put this out here. It's along with the timeline. Look, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But when it starts bending, we got to start pulling it, you know, because it's going to take longer for that arc to start coming down if we just wait. You know, we got to start pulling on that arc. So I'm going to give you this last this last speech of Dr. King in 67. Another one of those speeches in 67. This is the revolutionary radical, Dr. King.
I must confess, my friends, the road ahead will not always be smooth. There will still be rocket paces of frustration, meandering points of bewilderment. There will be inevitable setbacks here and there. There will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transformed into the fatigue of despair. Our dreams will sometime be shattered, and our ethereal hopes blasted. We may again, with tear-drenched eyes, have to stand before the bier of some courageous civil rights worker whose life will be snuffed out by the dastardly acts of bloodthirsty mobs. Difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. And as we continue our charted course, we may gain consolation. And the words so nobly left by that great black Bart was also a great freedom fighter of yesterday, James Weldon Johnson. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over the way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the bright gleam of our bright star is cast. Let this affirmation be our ringing cry. It will give us the courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil. Power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Let us realize that William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. Let us go out realizing that the Bible is right. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. This is our hope for the future. With this faith, we will be able to sing in some not too distant tomorrow with a cosmic past tense. We have overcome. We have overcome. Deep in my heart, I did believe we would overcome.
These are some of the sources. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and stay. Hopefully you were able to stay around for the whole thing. This is, like I said, this is my first, but it won't be my last. My last podcast. The next one is going to be considerably shorter. Just testing this platform out, learning. Actually, there's a part I wanted to do, and I'm probably going to do it on the next one. I'm going to break the topics we covered on the Doctrine of Discovery and cultural hegemony, and I'm going to use some secular movies to make an analogy of those terms and those ideas and concepts. And I'm going to use a movie to demonstrate how what the COVID-19 is like. And I'll tell you the movies. The movie that best is the best analogy for the Doctrine of Discovery is, War of the Worlds. perfect analogy for the Doctrine of Discovery. And a movie analogy for a cultural hegemony would be The Matrix. Beautiful analogy of exactly explanation of cultural hegemony. And the movie that best describes the COVID-19 pandemic and the whole concept of this video is The Day the Earth Stood Still. The next video, that's what's going to be on. So thank you for your time and attention. I'm going to be posting these, and like I said, there'll be more. I'm also going to be posting this directly related to this. I'm also a swing dance instructor. Like I said, everything has to be, you have to be intentional and purposeful in everything, at least that I do. So these things that I do, I've been teaching dance for a long time, and nobody ever knew the intent behind it and the purpose of it. And it's more than just about having fun and dancing at the time. And that's a big part of it. But it's culture, one of the biggest part of culture, one of those cultural control mechanisms is entertainment and music. And who excels better at music and entertainment than African Americans? You know what I'm saying? But we don't understand how to use it for a positive purpose, or for an intent toward our long-term goal of liberation and freedom. And those tools that we learned from those activities like music and dance. So I have a website channel for my dance classes that I'm doing online. I'll be doing more of those. I'm also going to be doing more. I'm going to start elaborating on these things. I know some of you may think went pretty detailed today, but I did this whole monthly segment. I didn't get through it for various reasons, but I did a daily 30-day history, not Black history. See, that's one of the things that they do. You know, they again divide and conquer, and they controlling the narrative. That's a big thing. That's one of the biggest parts of the Doctrine of Discovery. You know, they control, they put out this narrative, a story, and everybody's sticking to their story, right? And the victor tells the story. So we have to start developing and sticking in our own narratives, start telling our own stories and creating our own narratives. So that's a big part of this. And that's what the big part of the whole history thing that I'm going to be doing, history and culture. All right, but we're going to start on history. So there'll be a lot of content coming forward in the next few weeks, few months, not months, but probably a few weeks. Like I said, I'm going to be doing, the very next thing I'm going to do is going to be the movie analysis of the terms we talked about today, Doctrine of Discovery and Cultural Hegemony, and the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll do those three analogies to move it. That'll be the very next thing, probably tomorrow. I'll do that. And then I'll have classes. That's another thing. My classes on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays online. Whenever we come out of quarantine, I will have them on site, but I will still going to incorporate the online thing into the actual studio classes. So I'll be posting all that stuff. This is going to be posted to Facebook, my YouTube channel, Twitter, and I think that's it. So you'll be seeing this stuff, and I'll be putting out more information on how you can find it and how you can become a cultural warrior and join me in this fight, you know. So thank you for your time and attention, and I'm out.